Good afternoon, folks. My name is Jimmy Bashar with the ISO Stakeholder Affairs Group. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the California ISO customer call to discuss provisioning access to our automated dispatch system, or ADS replacement. For today, our agenda, as you can see, will be to begin with the rollout plan, followed by the transition of your access between the existing and new or replacement system, followed by a discussion on the access and identity management, or AIM ACL reminders, and then we'll conclude today with the remaining timeline of this rollout. In leading our presentation today will be our Diana Adesani from our Customer Services Group, and I'm also joined by Gina Wanzer from Customer Services Training and Readiness Team, as well as Vishwa Koganti from our Corporate Systems Group. In addition, our calls and webinars are recorded for stakeholder convenience, allowing those who are unable to attend to listen to the recordings after the meetings. The recordings will be publicly available on the ISO webpage for a limited time following the meetings. Of course, the recordings and any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. And lastly, of course, if you have any questions, we do encourage verbal questions only. Please raise your hand virtually by pressing #2. And of course, we request that everyone states your name and the company that you represent, please. And with that, I'll hand it over to Diana.
Excellent. Thank you, Jimmy. Hi, this is Diana Adesani. So first wanted to talk about a little bit on the background of who the audience is that we're speaking to related to this presentation. So the audience that we're really speaking to, the actions that need to be taken are really by the user access administrator at the scheduling coordinator. If you are a resource owner user of ADS or a resource owner user access administrator, I'm going to ask you to work with your scheduling coordinator user access administrators, as they're the ones that are going to be doing most of the work in the AIM application to get you access. Okay, that being said, so the new ADS, the ADS rollout plan, so we are going to be transitioning to the transitioning of the ADS provisioning is going to move to the AIM application at the resource level access control. So right now, ADS, if a scheduling coordinator is provisioning access to a resource owner for a specific resource or resources, the user access administrator, I'm going to start saying UAA, by the way, because it's shorter. The UAA at the scheduling coordinator has been submitting an application access request form. Moving forward, the UAAs will be able to provision ADS in the AIM application, the Access and Identity Management application. The other big change is also that ADS will be launched from the Market Participant Portal like all other applications. No ADS client to install, okay? So prior to production, the new ADS application will be rolled out in 2 stages. First is what I'm calling the ADS replacement. So this is just to replace what is there today. It's going to be released in the stage environment. This is most scheduling coordinators do not have access to the stage environment, so this is a kind of a different way to release the application. It's going to be using production data, so you can look side by side between the ADS replacement and your production ADS, the current ADS, and see that the data looks the same, comes out at the same time. And this will be, oh, actually, I need to make a correction. The date should read the week of July 6th. So apologies, I just realized that this version doesn't have the right date. But we'll talk about that later. And the dates will always be updated in the RUG meetings. Okay? So there's the ADS replacement, stage environment, production data. Then there's going to be the ADS enhancement. So this is going to be new features. That will be released to the math stage environment. That's the normal market simulation environment. using map stage data, and that will be the week of July 27th. Jimmy, can you please go to the next slide? Excellent. Okay. So the same certificate will work with the new ADS. So existing ADS requires a certificate to be installed in the ADS key store. Once we move to the new ADS, it'll be from the market participant portal like all other applications. The main thing is the users need to ensure that the certificate is installed in the browser for the new ADS to function. Since the certificate used to be installed directly into the key store directory, it may not be installed in your browser. So this is a note to self. Make sure that the users have their certificates installed in the browser. If they're using any other applications like CMRI or OMS or MRIS for metering, then it's installed in the correct place already. Okay? So existing ADS access at the SCID level, provisioned via AIM, will automatically work in new ADS. So to the extent that a user had access to ADS at the SCID level in the market simulation environment, it'll work for the new ADS in the market simulation environment for that SCID. Existing ADS access at the ADS access control list level, that's the ACL level, that's the resource grouping level as opposed to the full SCID, those will need to be recreated by the UAAs in AIM. So as you recall, the ACLs give the UAAs the ability to provision access at the resource level as opposed to giving a user access to all resources under an SCID. Jimmy, do you want to open it up to see if there's any questions yet? Ethan, sorry.
As of right now, we have no questions. Oh, we just had one come through. And as a friendly reminder to everybody else, you can enter the question queue by pressing #2 on your telephone keypad. And when you hear the line, your line has been unmuted, please state your name. And I believe, Jimmy, was it the company that you're from?
Yes, thanks so much, Ethan. Your name and your company, please, if you don't mind. Appreciate it.
All right. And I'll go ahead and get started with the first question. Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yeah, this is John Diff from Southern California, Edison. By any chance, do you guys see any opportunity for you guys to be able to migrate the current ACLs for ADS into the AIM? Because a lot of our ACLs are actually created only for the current applications and not ADS, and so I know you sent us a list, but it's going to take quite a while. So kind of fearing that a lot of the current ADS resources counterparties won't have access to ADS while we create these ACL groups.
Yeah, John. So unfortunately, the answer is no. Because of information security, we need to have every access come from the customer that has the authority to create the access. So that's why we're doing this a month ahead of time for the stage environment opening, so that the UAAs have sufficient time to recreate these ADS ACLs to the extent that it's necessary in AIM. So unfortunately, no, we will not move or copy existing access from one server or one database to another. They all need to be recreated by the user access administrators. This is kind of what we did when MRIS metering came out and we went from OMAR to MRIS. Unfortunately, we had to go through the same steps.
Okay. And is the drop dead date July 6th, or is it the other date?
So July 6th is when. So July 6th is when the environment opens. So you technically have from July, the week of July 6th all the way through September to do this testing. So it's really the ability to open up the ADS replacement early before market simulation in the stage environment is really for market participants to get a chance to play and feel comfortable with the application before we go live in October. So you have, several months to play with the ADS replacement in stage environment. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ethan, you had another next question?
Yes. Moving on to our next caller. You are now unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hey, Diana, it's Amy at Modesto. And I have that question. When you say that the same certificate that we put in the key store, we now have to put into the browser, does that mean that users will now have two ISO certificates in their browsers, not just the one that they have always had in their browser for market transactions?
So if a user only had access to ADS, then they never required the browser to be in the certificate to be in the browser. If the user has access to any other application, they already have the certificate installed in the browser and no action is required on your end. You don't have to do anything else. But if the user only had access to ADS, they have the certificate in the key store directory, they may not have it in the browser.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Any other questions, Ethan?
We have about 3 more questions in the queue. I'll let you know if that changes, and we'll move on to the next question. Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi there, Erin Kester with Avangrid Renewables. I think it's pretty clear on your slide, but just to reiterate, only the ACL groups will need to be re-provisioned. Is that correct?
Correct. So if your users already have access in the market simulation environment to ADS at the SCID level, you don't need to do anything else. And the reason I keep on saying in the market simulation environment in map stage, because you likely don't have access in the stage environment. So to the extent that your user has access, needs access in the stage environment to ADS at the SCID level, you will need to provision that. And we'll go into that a little bit more in further slides.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, last question, I believe, Ethan, or are there more after that?
I do believe we have, after that caller, we have 3 more questions left. I'll go ahead and get started with
okay.
the question.
Go ahead.
Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hello, this is Krishna Gade from Puget Sound Energy. So the question I have is, we are in the ISO energy imbalance market, and I believe all the accesses were activated via the AIM, and I'm only the UAA for the merchant side. And when I open the AIM now, I don't see any access control list for the scheduling coordinator that I'm in charge of. But I believe that the statement 2 on this slide suits me, because all the existing ADS access it appears to be provided via AIM.
Correct. So if your entity only provisions access at the SCID level, then you don't have to worry about this ACL control, the ACL level. So what I recommend, you can, your client rep should have sent a list of ACLs. If you didn't receive one, then you don't have any, but definitely check with your client rep to confirm that you don't have any ACLs that need to be transitioned over to AIM. Does that answer your question?
It does, yes. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Next question.
All righty, moving on. Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead. Caller, if you can ensure that your device as well is also unmuted.
I'm sorry. This is Chris Nichol with Shell Energy. I know in the past you guys have used the application access request form. Now that everything for these ACLs is being created in AIM, is the ARF going away now, or is that still? Do we still need to, additional requests need to be submitted through that?
So once we implement this, there's still a couple of applications on the ARF. I think it's transmission registry and there's something else. I forgot what else is on the ARF. But once we open this up in the stage and the market simulation environment and production, then the ARF will no longer be necessary. So if you're going to provision somebody to production access between now and October 1st, you will still need to use the ARF. Okay, so and it'll, I should say October 1st. So there's probably going to be at some point in late September that will open up production access for the October 1st implementation. And at that point in the game, then the ARF won't be necessary. But between now and then, if you're provisioning access to production, you will still need the ARF in the meantime.
Okay. It does, yes. Thank you. And I just have one other one real quick. Is the kite still in their back-end ADS ACLs? Are those going to be different from the ACLs on the user interface? Because I think currently they're different, but I think you guys said you were going to merge them to be so that they're both consistent.
So they have a different nomenclature, and we'll talk about that in a minute. They look different. The names of them are different if it was an ADS ACL created through the ARF versus an AIM ACL created through AIM. So they look different.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
If that was okay. Any other questions, Ethan?
Moving on, I do believe we have two more. One more came through.
Okay.
Caller, you are now unmuted. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Lillian Rwanda from PSE. I'm just wondering, okay, so you talk about the existing ADS access, but what if we have several upcoming certs that are expiring? So if we're going to be renewing a new cert, how does that work for ADS? Is it going to be instructions?
So remember, nothing changes with the certificate, okay? So to the extent that you had a certificate that had access, and I will speak to market simulation, that had access to market simulation ADS at the SCID level, you're good. Don't worry about it. Renew your certificate if appropriate, and you're fine. If that same certificate user does not have access to the stage environment for ADS, you will need to do that you will need to take the steps necessary in the AIM application. But the certificate itself is still good. As long as you renew it, whatever access it had before, it'll have afterwards as well.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
All right. Yes, but I'm still not sure if PSE is SCID level or ACL. I think it's SCID. But how do I verify? Is that new or am I new or
sure.
UAA?
You know, the best thing to do, Lily, is contact your client rep.
Okay.
And we can confirm that for you because everybody's circumstances are a little bit different. Also, stay tuned. For the end of this presentation, I will give you some links as to how you can also verify this. So it's coming.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions, Ethan?
I do believe we have one more question in queue.
Okay, and then we'll stop after this so I can go to the next slide. Go ahead, Ethan.
Alrighty. Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This is David Brown with California Department of Water Resources. I had a quick confirmation question and just an observation. At the ADS demonstration in April, it was indicated that the browser's ISO is going to support will be Edge with Chromium and Chrome. Is that still the case?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay. And the other applications, do they also support being supported with Edge with Chromium and Chrome? I thought it was Internet Explorer was the browser of choice for those MRIs. And
yeah, you're correct. So I know. So I don't know the answer to this question. I believe what you're asking is, are we adding Chrome for ADS in addition to Internet Explorer, or is it in replacement of Internet Explorer? I have a guess, but I want to confirm that. So let me, I will get back to you by the end of this presentation. We'll get you an answer to that question, David.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And then the other observation was when I try to connect to this meeting's WebEx, I get, of all things, a certificate error in my web browser. But I'm following along with the presentation that you guys have uploaded. So I don't know if others cannot connect or if it's just isolated to me, but just wanted to point that out, and thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, David. Okay, let's move on so we can get to the good stuff. So, Jimmy, if you could please move to the next slide. Okay. Okay, so this is what the UAAs need to do. So the UAAs will need to reprovision ADS ACL access in AIM. Okay, so AIM ACLs that work for OMS, MRIS, will work for the new ADS. So, Chris, I think you had asked, so the ADS ACL nomenclature, if you were to look in AIM, would say X_FCID 567. The AIM ACL start with an EXC, FCID 1234. So you will know if an AIM ACL that starts with EXC that has access to that you've already done for ADS, it'll work. Okay. So we've provided a list of AIM ACLs that can be used to replace the ADS ACLs to all the SC user UAAs. If you didn't get one, that means you don't have one. Okay. So the list identifies all the ADS ACLs that contain the same exact resources as the AIM ACLs. So if the ADS ACL contains resources A, B, and C, and the AIM ACL contains only resources A and B, we said this is not a match. Only if the same exact resources were in the AIM ACL did we identify that, okay? We also gave you a list of the users currently provisioned for ADS ACLs in production. So to the extent that you want to recreate that access in stage, map stage, and production, that is your call. And the list also identifies the users that will need to be endorsed to the SC from the resource owner in order for AIM to allow the AIM ACL to be added. I will speak a little bit more about that in a minute. Jimmy, we can go to the next slide, please. Excellent. Okay, so the first thing is the UAAs need to determine which users need access to each environment. So again, stage is ADS replacement, map stage is ADS enhancement, and then there's obviously production. So we talked about this before. Access in each environment must be provisioned by the UAA separately in AIM. So if you provisioned access in map stage, it doesn't just automatically work in the stage environment. You have to specifically say, if you gave access to John Doe in the map stage environment, you need to say, and I also want John Doe to have access to the stage environment. Or you can say he can have access to the stage environment, but not map stage or not production. So you need to specifically state which environment you're provisioning for in AIM. You can begin doing this ACL work now. The AIM is already open to provision access to the stage environment. Go ahead, Jimmy, to the next slide. So a couple of reminders about the AIM ACLs. Once an ACL is created, resources can be added, but they cannot be removed. So if you created an AIM ACL that has resources A, B, and C, and C resource transfers to another scheduling coordinator, you cannot remove it from the ACL. You have to create a new ACL. And the ACLs can be made non-provisionable if, in fact, you want to deactivate an ACL. We provided some of the references there. Why don't we stop now and see if there's any questions?
Alrighty, once again, I don't see any questions in the queue as of now, but if you do press #2, it will place you into the question queue.
Okay.
Starting to see some questions come through, so I'll go ahead and get started with the first one. Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, Diana. This is John again from Southern California, Edison. Did I hear you correctly that you said that once if let's say an ACL has 4 resources, one of the resources falls off and is managed by another O&M provider, that you would need to create a new ACL? What would happen to the current ACL, since we wouldn't want to provide visibility to the old O&M provider?
Yeah, good point, Chris. I probably used a bad example. If, in fact, a resource B transfers to another SC, there's no harm to the old SC keeping it in the ACL because you no longer have access to it. So you don't have to, deactivate the ACL because you no longer have access to it. It's more if, you had an ACL with resources A, B, and C, and that resource owner no longer represents that resource. You don't want to give them access. You only want them to give them access to A and B. In that case, you probably want to remove, if they're all under your SCID, you would want to remove it. You would want to deprovision, make it non-provisionable and create a new one. So if it's related to a transfer of a resource, no harm in you keeping it in there because you don't have access to it anyway. Does that answer your question, or is it very...
Kind of. So in my situation, let's say we see a lot of resources going from one O&M provider to the next. If we leave that current ACL the way it is and we're not able to delete it, what's going to happen is that old O&M provider can still see the resource in ADS, which will potentially violate privacy or data privacy issue concerns. So I don't know if there's any way around that. Do we have to delete the entire original ACL group and then reprovision if there's 4, reprovision to 3? So that's one of the things that might I don't know if you guys have considered.
So Chris, in AIM, the AIM ACLs have a certain hierarchy. So the SCID owns the AIM ACL beneath it, okay? So let's say at the SCID level, you manage 10 resources, and this AIM ACL that you've created is only for 3 of the 10. To the extent, and Dishwa, jump in at any time if I'm saying anything correctly. If, let's say, resource A is no longer under your SCID, then it'll automatically not be visible through the AIM ACL because that resource is no longer under your SCID. So even though the AIM ACL may contain it, part of the hierarchy says, go ahead, Bishwa.
I think it will have an end date on it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, so I guess in our situation, we will still remain the scheduling coordinator. So we will have visibility to the resource, but it's changed O&M providers. Okay. I guess the question is, sorry, wanted to clarify.
Yeah. Yeah, no, in that scenario, you're correct. So it's still under your SCID, but you don't want the O&M provider to be able to see resource A, only B and C. At that point in the game, you would either need to, make that ACL unprovisionable in AIM or just take away that user's access to that ACL and create a new one. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like there's going to be a lot of maintenance because we have a lot of transfers of O&M providers between different groups, and especially when we onboard a resource, an asset management company has invested in, they would request access, and then 2 months later, 3 months later down the line, they sell it to another O&M provider. And so it might cause a lot of changes within ACLs that we have to provision. Not sure if, go ahead.
So, Chris, this is no different than it is today. The only difference is you have to submit an ARF for us to make that change. The main difference now is that you can do it yourself in AIM. Before, when you gave John Doe access to ACL 123, ADS ACL 123 that had resources A, B, and C in it, and John Doe no longer should be able to see resource A, he should be able to see B and C, you would have to submit a new ARF. Now you just do it through AIM. So really not much has changed in what needs to be done. But it is a different way of doing things, so I don't want to minimize the work that needs to be done.
Okay, not a problem. And then my second question might not be related to this, since this is all based off of ACL, discussions on ACL. But are you guys changing anything related to the APIs between ADS and systems? Because we have a generation management system here, and it's connected through an API, and just wondering if any of that's going to change.
So there is going to be a new API to take advantage of the enhancements of the new features. But if you continued using the existing ADS API, you'd be able to access ADS the way that you do today, but you wouldn't be able to take advantage of the enhancements. We will talk more about this once we go into the market simulation. Okay, because the tech specs will be published and show what's in the ADS enhancement API. The other thing to keep in mind is we always support only 2 versions of an API. So we will probably retire one version and keep the latest version that we have now plus the new version that includes the enhancements.
Okay,
does that
thank
answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Gina, did you want to review your response regarding Chrome?
Sure. So regarding the question relating to Edge for Chromium and Chrome, so for ADS UI replacement, This is the support for Chrome and Edge with Chromium is replacing Internet Explorer, so you will need those. Our long-term goal is to support Chrome and Chromium-based Edge for all applications, but as of right now, some of the applications will still require Internet Explorer. To stay tuned on which applications are moving when, please stay tuned to the TUG. And I would say that same note for Diana's question that she just answered as well. Stay tuned for the reg and the TUG in terms of API changes as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Gina. Any other questions, Ethan?
Yes, just so you know, as of now, we have about 3 more questions left in the queue, and I'll go ahead and get started with the next question. Caller, you are unmuted. Okay. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is James Reschke, ND Energy. I have a couple of questions for you. Now, if we have users that currently have access to stage and map stage and production as well, do we have to resubmit access for them, or will they just automatically carry over?
So you as an EIM entity, because you have had access to stage, if the access that's there already was at the SCID level, then you don't need to do anything else. They already have access to stage ADS at the SCID level.
Right. Okay. So that'll just carry over and they'll still have access to that.
Yes.
Okay. Now, also, too, it sounds like the key store is going away, and so we won't have to deal with that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, and there won't be a need for any PEM files or anything like that after that. They could just go right to the portal to get to ADS.
Yes. So it'll be just like every other application, like Cyber or CMRI, whatever. You just click on the link for the portal, and voila.
Okay. Now, will they have to remove the key store folder or anything like that? That's not going to cause any issues?
Not that I'm aware of. I will check that, but my understanding is, it might be there, but nothing is going to try to point to it, so there's no harm in it just being there.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Alrighty, moving on to our next question. Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Jenna Noyes from Pacific Corp. I received from Steve Tassinelli, our account rep, a file that has a list of ADS ACL to AIM ACL. And in the AIM ACL column, it says not an AIM ACL. So what does that mean? And what action do I need to take?
Sure. So that was where we were, and by the way, I think in the email we explained what that means. So to the extent that the ADS ACL matched the AIM ACL exactly, we said, here's the AIM ACL that you can use. You don't have to recreate a new one. To the extent that we couldn't find an AIM ACL that matched exactly the ADS ACL content, we said not an AIM ACL. So you will need to recreate that grouping in AIM.
Okay, so it is up to us to recreate it based on the nomenclature that you just provided us before. We just add the EX to the front of it?
No. So when you create an AIM ACL, it creates a new grouping. So you're basically going to be saying, my ADS ACL used to have resources A, B, and C. You're going to go into AIM. You're going to create an AIM ACL. It's going to ask you which resources do you want to have. You're going to add A, B, and C. And then by the time it creates the AIM ACL, it'll be EXE PAC1 _ 567.
Okay,
so you're not renaming the ADS ACL. Excuse me?
So I will not be creating the name, it will auto-assign a name based on a grouping?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, I believe we have 2 more questions in the queue. I'll go ahead with the next question. Caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hey, this is Anthony Vito, PG&E. Got a few questions regarding the ACL groups. If CAISO is not going to allow for resources to be removed from ACL groups, does CAISO see any potential problems with seamless access? Meaning, is CAISO going to provide any extra help if we're removing an ACL group and adding a new one? Can CAISO guarantee that the ADS access will be seamless, or is the resource potentially going to be in the dark for a little bit?
So a couple of things. So the AIM ACLs, the functionality that you cannot remove resources from AIM ACLs, that has been there since 2014. So that's not anything new, okay? Actually, it's not 2014. I don't know. It's been there for, I think it's 2014. So the ability to not remove resources from ACLs has been there from the beginning of ACL functionality in AIM. We're discussing this now, 3 months, 4 months before we actually go into production, just so that nobody goes in the dark, okay? And we're giving you the ability to test that everybody has the right access in 3 different environments, the stage environment, the market simulation environment, and eventually production, so that all the market participants that must have access to ADS have enough time, you as the UAA that are doing the heavy lifting of doing the work, that you have plenty of time to confirm with your users you're good, you see your access, you see your resources, it looks the same as it used to before, test it, make sure, so that, again, we don't have any going in the dark, come October. So to the extent that you provision AIM access to an ACL with resources A, B, and C in the map stage environment, users that have access to that will see just resources A, B, and C in the map stage environment. Does that answer your question, Anthony?
Kind of. I guess I'm still concerned with if we're going to go through all this heavy lifting of transferring access and really clean everything up on the back end. I guess I'm just worried about the timeline for when we, disconnect an ACL and add a new ACL to a certificate. But I guess we could just create new ones concurrently while the old one is still there. Would that create any conflicts if there's the same resource on 2 different ACLs that are applied to access to a certificate?
No. Vishwa, do you see any problems with 2 ACLs with the same resources, the same user having access to both ACLs? Is there any issue with that you can think of?
I don't think so, Diana. It should work. But are they thinking, is it for the same application, same ACL having same resource? Why would we need something like that? Are they talking about the old one versus the new one?
Well, the reason
so currently we have...
So there would be seamless access, visibility of that resource in ADS so they don't go dark for a little bit while one access is cut and the new access is applied. Unless, of course, they could have access on 2 different ACLs to the same resource.
Yeah, those are old ACLs, and the one you're going to create will have a different name. So you will see some difference, but they can have resource in both ACLs, same resources. Right? Is that,
yeah.
Is that, okay.
Does that make sense, Anthony? So as long as you have the same resources, the same end dates on both ACLs, then that user just has access 2 different ways. The only thing that I would be concerned about, and this is just purely an administration, is that to the extent that you're removing access for a user, now you have to remove 2 ACLs as opposed to just removing 1. So it's really how you want to do it. That's the list that we gave you so that you don't recreate ACLs that already have the right resources in them.
Okay. I'll touch base with you offline. I got further questions regarding that, but we can take it offline.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
Alrighty, I do believe we have one more question in the queue. Would you like to go ahead and answer?
Yep, let's go ahead.
Alrighty, caller, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hello, this is Krishna again from Puget Sound Energy. I have a question on the firewall rule that we currently have to open connection to the ADS server at CAISO. Now that we are not using, or we are getting away with the client installation and switching over to browser, and our firewall rules already might have other rules to, get connected or access to all the browser-based applications. Should I talk to our firewall rule and just get rid of the existing firewall rule to access the ADS server?
To be honest with you, I do not know the answer to that question. What I would recommend is you send an email. You can either send it to me or to your client rep, and we'll address the firewall question, because I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. One question that came up in the chat that I've seen is to clarify that we no longer need a P12 version of the certificate. The P12 is the certificate. So all we're saying, so yes, the P12 certificates or files are still necessary. What is not necessary is that you copy it to the key store directory. That's the part that will no longer be required once we launch ADS through the portal. So it'll be, July 6th in the stage environment, July 27th in the map stage environment, and October 1st for the production environment. So the P12 is still necessary. Okay? So just,
Diana?
follow, I just want to state one thing. Follow the normal directions for installing your certificate in your browser. Sorry, Gina, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to make one clarifying point, and maybe this is what they're asking, is I think there is a step when you're installing ADS currently that you have to change your certificate from a PFX extension to a P12 extension. And once the ADS UI replacement is in production, then you should not have to do that when you do the key store, because that key store will no longer be there, like you said. So the PFX file should be okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Oh, and sorry, one more clarification point. Just to make sure that everybody is clear on this too, you still need to do what you do for ADS today, currently, until the new ADS UI is live.
Okay. Any other questions, Ethan? Thank you, Gina. Ethan, any other questions?
Yes, I do see one more question that just came through. Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, please.
Caller, you are now unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. This is Katie Fambrini calling from Shell Energy, and this is a little bit, it refers to a past question by Chris at SoCal, but it had to do with transferring a resource owner within the same SCID, and it sounded like the solution was, when that happens, is to make your old ACL group non-provisionable and then start a new ACL group with your 2 old resources and then not include your 3rd resource that had transferred resource owners. And I think I foresee a problem with that because then the old resource owner may want historical data, and using that old ACL group as provisionable may allow them to query for historical data. So I was just curious if anyone else sees that as an issue or if you guys have thought of that as a potential issue.
Vishwa, did you want to speak to the start and end dates of the ACLs? Would that address that issue?
Can you go back later and change the end date to an ACL? Like, let's say, like, when you're creating it, you don't know that your resource owner is going to leave on July 1st, and then suddenly they decide to leave. Can you go back and end date it, change the end date?
As far as I remember, we cannot change the end date or start date on the ACL group, but we can confirm. If in case you want, what is the requirement that you change the end date?
Well, if
Correct.
it was possible,
so let's just say the resource owner currently has access to an ACL that has resources A and B, and as of July 1st, they should no longer be able to see, the resource starting July 1st, but but until the rest of the time, they should be able to query the data when they were the resource owner. Correct, Katie?
Yes, but then sometimes maybe like in August, they may want to go back.
Yes, that historical data exists. They can always query back until the access they have, like July 1st.
But do they lose access to the resource starting July 1st when they wanted to query June data, when they were still the resource owner?
No. The historical access until July 1st will be valid. Only they cannot access from July 1st. Suppose if it is, right now it is August 1st, but the ACL group ended on July 1st, they can access the resource information until July 1st. Afterwards, they don't have access according to the end date that UAA put in, right? Yes. That's where the end date comes to picture. So when UAA selected end date, basically that is the date that they will be losing the access, but they can go back and have the historical access anytime.
Oh, that's great. But the other problem is that we're only allowed to create the end date initially when we first create the ACL group itself. We're not allowed to go back at a later date and change the end date, and that's problematic because without that ability, if we get a new resource owner, we can't predict a year in advance that maybe that resource owner will leave us on July 1st. So typically we just choose our end dates for 10 or 20 years out. And so in reality, what we would be doing is just making the entire ACL group non-provisionable because we don't have the ability to change the end date on a rolling basis.
Vishwa, does the end date not come from master file? Oh, no, it would still be the same. No,
Actually, resource end date comes from the master file, but when it comes to ACL group end date, that is what decided by the UAA when he's creating originally. But if they do not know exact dates, if they're putting approximate dates and it is ended, they have to recreate again for them. Or even if they
So, Katie, why don't we do this? Let's take this offline. We will publish this an answer to your question, and we will add this to the website, where this presentation is located. I will add another document that answers these questions, just to make sure we've had time to go through the different scenarios. Is that okay, Katie?
Great, thank you very much.
I understand your question, so we'll address that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions, Ethan?
There are no other questions in the queue at this time.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, Ginny, the next slide. Okay, so this is just the summary from the RUG presentation. We will publish an updated version of this presentation because the June 22nd date again has moved out to July 6th, the week of July 6th. So we will publish an updated version of this. Just as a reminder, the production, the decommissioning of the current ADS, that date has not been determined yet. I know that some market participants have asked that question, so stay tuned. We're trying to give all market participants sufficient time to learn and provision access, like the question that Anthony from PG&E had raised, to make sure that nobody goes dark when we decommission the existing ADS that we have right now. So we don't have a date for that yet. Okay. I think that's it. Jimmy, is in my next slide just says questions. I think that's what it says. Okay. So just as a reminder, please stay tuned to the RUG meetings and the TUG meetings. That's where any updates regarding dates will be discussed. And I included some of the links to the ADS replacement demonstration presentation that we gave in April, plus the tariff, some of the enhancements and that will be coming up. Gina is going to be holding 2 trainings. Gina, do you want to remind folks about the trainings?
Sure. So we should have a market notice going out later this week for the first one. So next week, June 11th, which is Thursday, 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific time, we'll be doing part 1, and part 1 training will be focused on the core replacement UI. Then the next one, part 2, will be July 16th, same time, 1 o'clock Pacific time. And this one will cover more of the enhancements that are associated with the replacement, which you can read about both sets of requirements in the BRS. And then if you are involved in the dispatch operating tariff clarification, that will be immediately following the ADS replacement training part 2 on July 16th as well. So just to kind of give a review of the timeline, the June 11th should give you a couple weeks to prepare for the application preview for your users. And then the July 16th will be in preparation for market simulation. And one other note to put out there too, for those of you involved in market sim, they did post in the release planning some of the market sim scenarios. So I recommend that you review those as well. They just posted those on Friday.
Great. Thank you, Gina. Okay. Any last questions? Ethan, any other questions?
I have no further questions in the queue as of now.
Excellent. Thank you all for attending. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to contact your client rep or me, Diana Adesani, directly if you have specific questions. I'd be glad to answer them. And look forward to Gina's training on June 11th. Jimmy, I think this is it. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana. Thanks, folks, of course, for joining us. A lot going on current events-wise. We appreciate your engagement. As mentioned, this call was recorded, so you can stay tuned for the recording to be posted underneath this meeting header on the web page within the next couple of business days. And please have a great rest of your afternoon. Stay safe and happy, of course. Thanks so much.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using Event Services Enhanced. You may now disconnect.